Good evening to you, and welcome to this edition of Cooking with Kevin. Today, I'm going to be addressing some questions from you, the viewers, some close to home and others somewhere across the nation. We're going to start first with some easier questions from people close to home. So I had Andrew of Salem, Oregon write in. He said, can you make vanilla extract at home without leaving it in a jar of vodka or rum for 6 to 8 weeks? In other words, how can you make vanilla extract at home? Well, Andrew, unfortunately there's no other way to make homemade vanilla extract. It needs some sort of hard liquor for it to soak in for up to 2 months. Vodka is preferable. You can do rum, brandy, any kind of hard liquor. And shake it up. The vanilla bean, you split it down the center till there's about an inch left connecting the two parts, and then you put it into like a mason's jar and let it soak for about 2 months, and then you can just start taking it out by teaspoon or tablespoon or however you want for any kind of recipes you have. I hope that helps out. Next up, we have Regina, all the way from Flower Mound, Texas. I am just amazed that the show is reaching that far. It's awesome. So her question is, for diabetic people, how would you make a recipe sugar-free? That is an excellent question, Regina. I prefer to use a more natural sweetener, stevia. It's a plant that was found in Africa. It's about 3 times sweeter than sugar. So you have to use less of it, and yet it's sweeter than regular sugar, and it does not spike your blood sugar. There are other alternatives, like you can use like NutraSweet, which is like a derivative of aspartame, and you can also use Splenda, and both of those can usually be found in your grocery store on the baking aisle with all the sugars. And normally it's equivalent to the same amount of sugar as is in the recipe. So that can kind of give you an idea for measuring out. And it should taste about the same. There's usually a little bit maybe of an aftertaste, but it will not spike your blood sugar. Next up, we have Catherine of McMinnville, Oregon. She says, how can you keep meringue from reducing in volume while baking for a pie? Sometimes meringue goes flat instead of fluffy. Would you happen to know the solution? Well, Catherine, one thing I would say is try to avoid a hot, humid day if possible. This tends to affect the meringue's volume. Next, make sure that no yolk gets in the meringue. You do not want any kind of the fat of the egg getting in there. That will affect it as well. Also, adding a pinch of cream of tartar will help it remain firm. And try to use a metal or a glass bowl. Plastic bowls tend to have a little bit more oil in it, and that can affect the firmness of the meringue as well. And so now we are going a bit closer to home once again. We'll do Susie of Salem, Oregon. Her question is, how do you get a flaky crust without the use of shortening? Well, Susie, I would suggest using the recipe that I used a couple weeks back. It's located on the website, cookingwithkevinshow.com, under the recipes column. And it uses oil instead of the shortening and water, and the secret to getting a flaky crust when you're not using the shortening is to not overmix it. You don't want to overmix it. The more you mix it, the tougher the crust is. My rule of thumb is once it starts forming a dough, stop. Don't mix it more, and you will get a flaky crust. It's taken me a while to develop this technique for the pie crust. I have to tell you, I've had a lot of tough crusts throughout the years, but it works. Next, we'll move on to Rick from Turner, Oregon. His question is, there an easy way to measure honey? It always sticks to the measuring cup. Well, Rick, I have one answer for you, yes. It took me a while to figure this out. If you take a regular non-stick spray like your normal pan and spray the measuring cup in which you're going to put the honey in, the honey or the peanut butter or whatever kind of sticky ingredient you're using will come out very easily. You won't lose any of the ingredient on the sides of the measuring cup. I've always, until I figured that out, I always tried to scrape the measuring cup out to try to get as much of the ingredient out as I could because I felt like my recipe wasn't getting the full. But that will definitely help you out there. Alright, next we'll move on to Trisha of Kaiser, Oregon. Her question is, how do you pick out good iceberg lettuce? That is a great question, Trisha. I would suggest when you're going to the grocery store, you may look a little weird, people may look at you strange, but lift up the iceberg lettuce and turn it over to where the base of it and smell right at the center core. And if it smells bitter, it will be bitter. If it smells more a little sweeter, that's a good iceberg lettuce head. That will save you a lot of dread over, is this a good iceberg lettuce head, is this not? Just smell. If it's sweet, you'll be good to go. Next, we have Amanda of Vancouver, Washington. She asks, what's an easier way to slice cake? It always sticks to the knife and ruins the presentation. I know exactly what you're talking about, Amanda. The knife will take the frosting down with it, messes up the whole top, and the cake does not look presentable after even one piece is cut out. My suggestion is take some basic, you can do dental floss or a small string of some sort cut to the dimensions of the cake and just pull right down for the dimensions of the slice, and you'll notice that it will be perfect. The frosting will be undisturbed on the top. It helps with how having the thinner the string, the better it will be. Of course, if you do dental floss, I suggest unflavored because it can sometimes, like let's say it's a chocolate or not even, it can put like the flavor of the dental floss into it and it may not be tasty. And now we'll move on to Tom of Hillsboro, Oregon. His question is, how do you scald milk without scorching it? Well, Tom, I have an answer for you, and it will probably surprise you. And it's very simple. Simply add a dash of sugar to it and do not stir. I know it sounds crazy, but that is the secret. Dash of sugar and do not stir. You'll have perfect scalded milk. Before you know it, that is not scorched. And now we'll move on to Cheryl, all the way down in Eugene, Oregon. She asks, How do you make your gravy smooth? Well, I'll tell you what I do. I have a jar that has an equal amount of cornstarch and to an equal amount of flour mixed together. Okay, and then when I'm making gravy, I'll put about 3 to 4 tablespoons of that mixture into about 1/4 of a cup of water, maybe a little bit more water, and you shake that up real good to make sure it completely dissolves. You don't want any kind of lumps in it. You want it completely dissolved, and then slowly mix it into your gravy, stirring while you pour it in, and you'll have a perfectly smooth, thick gravy that will be luscious over mashed potatoes or whatever you're serving. All right, and final for tonight, we have Barbara of Salem, Oregon. She asks, how do you keep whipping cream from dissolving so quickly? Well, I have three things of advice for you. If you put a pinch of salt into your whipping cream, I know it sounds contradictory. You think add sugar to it for sweetness, which you still will add sugar to your whipping cream, but if you do a pinch of salt, it will strengthen the fat cells within the whipping cream, giving you a firmer whipped cream in the end. You can also add 1 egg white to your heavy whipping cream before whipping. This will help with the firmness. And finally, if you put a touch of unflavored gelatin to it, about 1/4 teaspoon per 1 cup, that will also help. And that's my favorite way to do it, but either of the 3 I said will work to help your whipping cream stay firm and not dissolve so quickly when you want it to be a good presentation on your pudding or your ice cream or your cake or whatever you're serving. So that concludes the questions that were written in. As always, I'm always open to any other questions you might have. Just send them to me on the website. Thank you very much for tuning in to this special edition of Cooking with Kevin, where I'm answering some of your most pressing questions and needs so that your kitchen preparations will be much more smoother. As always, keep cooking with Kevin.